Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries and welcome to my guest bedroom closet. As you can see, this is a pretty good size walk-in closet, but this space is very, very poorly utilized. When we first moved into this house a few years ago, all of the closets were like this, and I'm slowly making my way around trying to give them a little bit more function. So I hope you guys will enjoy watching this come together, but the first thing I need to do here is get what little is in here out and paint these walls. So if you're ready to dive in and get started, let's go. First, let's take a look into this closet space. It's a good size walk-in closet that measures about 5.5 foot across the back and about 6 foot deep. Since this door opens at the corner, this left wall is kind of useless. It might be good for some hooks that you could use for hats or belts, but there will only be room for cabinets along the back and the right walls. So I plan to build these in kind of an L shape. To prep the space, I removed the existing brackets and rails, but I did save those rails to use later. And I removed the baseboards. Then I painted the walls so that I had a bright, clean, blank slate to work with. But you're not here for this part. You're here for the fun part, building the cabinets. Basically, for this closet, I'm building 2 tall closet towers. One will go in the back left corner and the other will go in the front right corner. Once these are in place, I can kind of cut to fit to fill the space between. Everything here was made from birch plywood, so I started the build by trimming down my plywood sheets. I started building the closet tower with shelves and drawers first. For this cabinet, I cut 2 tall sides. Then I cut 3 shelves, one for the top, one for the bottom, and one for the middle. I also needed to cut 2 3.5-inch wide strips for the toe kick and for the top back support. Because I wasn't adding any face frames here, I edge banded the front of these pieces to cover the plies and to make it look nice and clean. Then I drilled pocket holes to assemble the cabinet. Side note, I really should have just attached the toe kick last because it was kind of in the way, but I got it to work. Once the main cabinet was together, I could add the shelves into the top section. Now, I always like to encourage you to customize however you see fit. Personally, I don't hang a lot of my clothes, I prefer shelves, but if you preferred hanging space over shelves, you can skip the shelves here and just add a hanging rod in this top section instead. And if you didn't want stationary shelves, you could instead do adjustable shelves. Obviously, there are lots of ways to utilize the cabinet space here. I simply screwed 2 stationary shelves, evenly spaced, into this top section. For the bottom, I plan to install 4 drawers. 3 deeper drawers and 1 shallow drawer. But again, if you wanted shelves or hanging rods here instead, that would work too. For the drawers, I measured out and installed 4 pair of 16-inch drawer slides into the bottom section of the cabinet. I've got a whole separate video on how to install slides that I will link in the video description for more details on that part. Once the slides were in, I could move on to my favorite part, building the drawers. I cut down 3/4-inch plywood pieces for the drawer boxes and I cut dados in them for the 1/4-inch plywood bottom. I've got a whole separate video on my drawer building process that I will link below for more details, but after I trimmed each piece to length, I applied edge banding to the tops. Then I assembled all 4 drawer boxes with pocket holes and screws, installing the 1/4-inch plywood bottom before adding the 4th side. To install the drawers, I removed the part of each slide that attaches to the drawer box, just lined it up along the bottom and the front edges and screwed it in place. Then each box slid right into the cabinet. At this point, this cabinet is complete except for the drawer fronts. I considered cutting the drawer fronts in a continuous grain pattern here, but ultimately I decided not to. But I did try to cut them from the part of my plywood that had a little extra character so that these flat panels weren't too boring. After edge banding the sides, I screwed them to the drawer fronts from the inside, leaving 1/8" gaps around all sides. By the way, these blue shims are part of the Craig drawer front installation jig. They work great, but any 1/8" shim would work just as well. And with that, I removed the drawer boxes to make carrying this cabinet inside a little easier. I positioned this cabinet in the back left corner of the closet, then I secured it to the wall studs and replaced the drawers. You'll notice that I added painter's tape to the drawer boxes, and that is so that I can still open these after they're installed. I'll come back and apply finish later, so I didn't want to add the knobs just yet. Next, I moved back to the shop to build the second closet tower. This one will have shelves at the bottom and a hanging rod across the top. This cabinet is similar, but even more basic than the first one. I cut 2 plywood strips, one for the toe kick and one for the top back support, 4 shelves, and 2 tall sides. And just like the other cabinet, I assembled this using pocket holes and screws. I installed the toe kick piece first, then angled the bottom shelf above it. You totally don't have to slope these shelves, I just kind of liked the slope for storing shoes, but if you wanted them flat, that's totally fine. I kind of just eyeballed the slope that I liked here, and according to my speed square, it ended up being about 15 degrees. I used a scrap piece of plywood as a spacer block to help me space the 2 shelves above it evenly. Then I installed the top shelf flat. After screwing the top support to the side panel, I flipped it over and attached the other side. Now I just needed to add the hanging rod. So my clothes hangers are about 16 inches wide, so I marked 8.5 inches from the back edge of this cabinet and about 3.5 inches down from the top on each side panel. This is where I'll center the hanging rod. I trimmed my hanging rod, the same rod that I removed from the closet earlier, to length and pre-drilled a pilot hole into the cabinet sides at my marks and into the center, or close to the center, it's not exact, of each end of the rod. Then I drove 2.5-inch screws through these holes to secure the rod in place. And with that, this cabinet is ready to install. Just like the other cabinet, I secured this cabinet to the wall studs through the top back support. And you may be wondering why I didn't add a top shelf to this cabinet. That's because I'm going to add a shelf across this entire wall, and that shelf will act as the top. So I cut a 3/4 inch plywood shelf, 16 inches wide by the exact length of my closet wall. Now, underneath this shelf in the open space beside this cabinet, I'm going to be adding an additional hanging rod. So I cut 2 pieces of plywood about 5 inches wide. I will run my rod between these 2 pieces. One of these needs to be 16 inches long in order to screw it into my wall studs, which are spaced 16 inches on center. The other piece needs to be the same width as my cabinet. You'll see what I mean here in just a minute. Once I drilled where I wanted my rod to go, I brought everything inside to install it. I placed the shelf across the cabinet first, then used a level to help me screw my rod support into the wall studs at the right height. I cut the closet rod to fit and installed the other rod support to the cabinet. This is why these pieces need to be different lengths. To finish up, I secured the top shelf to the cabinets and supports with a few screws. To wrap everything up, I applied a few coats of clear coat to the cabinets, replaced the baseboards around them, and then added the knobs to the drawers. And now this closet is packed full of simple, practical, nice looking storage and is a huge improvement over the original brackets and rails. The high rod at the back leaves plenty of room for hanging long suits or dresses, but if you wanted even more hanging space, you could easily add another hanging rod about halfway down. The slope shelves give plenty of room for shoes and boots, and the drawers are perfect for bulky items like sweaters and winter clothes. You can customize this modular closet cabinet design so many ways. I hope this gave you some ideas and inspiration, and I hope you enjoyed seeing this simple transformation. Check out the links in the video description for more project details and the printable plans. And be sure to stay tuned to the channel for many more builds to come. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy building!